Hey everybody, I am really excited to talk to you about researching automation. But before we jump in, I want to talk a little bit about humanity. So I'm going to steal a TikTok trend from a while ago. I want everybody to think about themselves and put a hand up. We're going to play put a finger down. Put a finger down if you've ever referred to a device and what it's doing using human terms, like, oh, it's lost, or oh, it's thinking. Now, put a finger down if you've ever used pronouns to describe a device, like she, they, or he. And finally, put a finger down if you've ever named a device or product. For example, this is my sewing machine. Her name is Bertha, or if I'm in a really good mood, I call her Birdie. So not only does my sewing machine have a name, she also has a nickname and pronouns. So if you're playing along at home, know that most people probably put at least one finger down when we just played this game. What I just described is something that's really common. These are all things that most people do, but also it's a really weird thing. We're talking about inanimate objects, we're talking about devices. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that even if this feels really strange, it's human nature to interpret the world based on how we move through it, and we do it all the time. So if this is something that humans do, and we know that it's something users do when interacting with devices, do we need to study this? How our users connect with, interpret, and respond to products has business impact. For example, in my research, we've identified a connection between product engagement, satisfaction, and trust, and the quote-unquote personality that users assign to their Roomba. So if we left that personality completely to chance, we didn't think about it or design for it, we just said, oh, we know that people are going to do that, we know they're going to name their product, we'd be leaving a huge opportunity for impact on the table. I know that it's easy to be resistant to this and to know that there can be resistance to having this conversation internally at your company. There was resistance to this line of research when we started talking about it at iRobot as well. It feels a little bit frivolous at times. But we know that this really has business impact. And so even though it feels weird to talk about, there's a lot of value in it. And when we talk about automation, I want to acknowledge that there are lots of different kinds of products that leverage automation. I think for a lot of us, when we think about researching social experiences with automation, we envision the kind of experience where social interaction is a core part of the product, where creating something that is expressive and emotive has a more prominent personality as a core part of the product experience. Things like toys, elder care devices, or education platforms. But the truth is, most products that leverage autonomy are not like this. And more products are starting to leverage autonomy. Everything from smart ovens that can now offload a lot of the cooking process and automate it for you in your kitchen, to self-driving cars. Many traditionally manual products are automating. And this means that we're starting to have more social thoughts and social experiences with a whole bunch of things in our lives and in our worlds. And there are opportunities to evaluate social perception as part of our user research practice as we design new tools. In fact, many experiences and workflows outside of traditional products are starting to leverage autonomy as part of their offering. Everything from sales guidance when you log onto a website to shop, to voice assistant skills that are games or helping through another device, or customer support when you log in to get help with a product. So our social interaction with experiences is especially important to consider in this particular moment because we haven't set all the rules yet. We're still looking at where automation fits in a whole variety of products and experiences. So right now, even if the product that you support doesn't have any sort of AI to it, it might in the future. In fact, it probably will. And so we have an opportunity as user experience researchers to shape how that incorporation of AI goes from the user experience side. So I want to talk today about using social perception research as part of our larger research practice for our tools and devices. But what does that mean? What does evaluating social perception actually mean? It means that we're acknowledging human nature. Users, which in most cases are humans, interpret their experiences with an automated system through the lens of social rules, expectations, and models that they already have. In psychology research, we explore the way humans interpret and respond to others in the study of social perception, thinking about social stuff. In robotics, the same avenue of study has emerged to focus on how humans interpret and respond to robots. It's often called social robotics. Ultimately, what I want you to think about here is that when we design automated experiences, we're designing social experiences between a human, our user, and the product or device that they're using. Over the last 5 years at iRobot, we've explored a bunch of methods from the academic space, where there's a lot of work happening in social robotics, to measure social perception of robots, and we've refined them for our industry environment, which often moves very quickly and has very different parameters than what we could explore in an academic world. So while exactly what we test and what we found for our products won't apply to you, today I want to share our biggest hits from this research toolkit. These methods can be used in a variety of product contexts, because at their core, they all leverage your unique brand or product voice, what we might call your product's desired personality. So we're going to talk about how to measure that. Let's dive in. Just to set the scene, here are the 5 big hits that we're going to talk about today. Key with all of these is that they are puzzle pieces that you can mix into studies to collect social perception feedback as you're planning and running other types of research, so that you're getting answers to social perception questions at the same time that you're answering the more traditional questions that your stakeholders will have throughout the product development journey. And again, these can be used for a variety of different kinds of products, not just products with hardware or products that are more traditionally considered robots. So to structure our conversation today, I'm going to look at these methods that are some of my favorites through the lens of our research roadmap and how this follows the product development journey. So we'll start with discovery, which is the most open-ended phase, where we're really thinking about humans trying to decide what we want to build at all. Then we'll talk about definition, where we're sort of leaning in, figuring out how we want this product to work and what it should do. Then we'll talk about 2 parts of the design iteration process. One is more traditional UX design, and the other is model development and training, which is working with our data science teams to figure out the algorithms and machine learning models that actually power our automation. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit how we can continue to use this as part of our ongoing feedback cycle, because, as we all know, research is cyclical. We want to continue to get feedback throughout the product journey, even after launch. So starting with discovery. Discovery is where we have the most room to play, because when we're thinking about experiences that don't exist yet, we really have a lot of room to use our imagination, and that I find really empowering. So at every phase, there's room to get creative, but we have the most freedom and we get the most value out of thinking outside the box when we're really early stages with something. And I find that, especially when we're talking about automation, as we started with at the beginning, this is kind of a weird topic. It can feel a little bit uncomfortable, even to people who already are working in tech. So the more that you and your research participants and your stakeholders can kind of get outside of technology, get outside of thinking about this as automation, the more genuine the feedback will be, and the better kinds of feedback you'll get from your participants. One method that we use a lot is puppetry. We really like to use puppets to brainstorm different robot movements or to get reactions from participants of what a robot might do in their home and if it's moving as expected. Another that I think applies to a lot of different industries is what we call movie casting call. So this is the idea that when a movie is hiring someone, having auditions for a role, they write out a casting call where there's a description of what the character is that anyone who comes in would be auditioning for. So sometimes this might be physical appearance, but oftentimes it's also a little bit about that person's attitudes and motivations. So we challenge participants to write a casting call where they describe the character of our product or an ideal product in this space. So a little bit can depend on whether you're really thinking far out, whether you're working with something that's already in development. We get really great responses to this, and from all of these different casting calls, we can look for themes and develop character archetypes of what our participants expect a future product, an ideal product, or characterize their current experience to be. Next is definition. So when we get to definition, we're narrowing in and starting to refine the product requirements. And as we've already discussed today, we know that humans are reacting to automation socially, and that those impressions shape their experience. So when laying out product requirements, there's a lot of value in detailing what kinds of impressions you want your users to take away from the product. So when a user engages with the product, should they feel like they had a friendly experience? Was the support chat accommodating? Calm, efficient? Is the product capable of completing the job? These are all essentially personality characteristics that we want to be able to track as part of our North Star vision for the product, as part of that product requirements. Figuring this out is an iterative process all on its own. There's probably a whole talk in there. Maybe I can give that one in the future. But one of my favorite methods here is attribute associations. So when we're trying to figure out our attributes and then after we've refined them, we can present a whole bunch of different words in a card sort or a survey question. And we always want to have a pair of both positive and negative words to help prevent bias. But we can ask participants in a study to rate their experience essentially by pulling out the words that they felt best described it. We can also do this for an ideal experience or for something that they've experienced in the past. And this can be a really powerful method for all kinds of features. We've used this for brand voice, for feature and product naming, and for ad testing, in addition for robot design. Next, let's talk a little bit about that iterative cycle of the design process. First, I want to talk about working with data. So we have a really strong relationship at iRobot with our data org, which has led to some really great collaborations over the years as we've looked at new automations that will work for the robot. If you work for a company that's developing automation or is using machine learning in-house, see if you can collaborate with that team. There's a lot of opportunity to get user feedback on the way an AI system is being trained to respond in different situations and how that aligns to users and their expectations for these kinds of products. So one of the things that I love to do here is what we call device perspective taking. So when we're thinking about empathy, might ask someone to take the perspective of another person in a situation. We do a similar thing with an automation experience. So we ask participants to think through a decision or outcome as the device or as the product to understand whether the algorithm works the way they expect. When they think about this and they try to envision themselves as the device, do they get to the same end? We also might ask them to give feedback on the outcome, just straight out, or to reason about how they think the device got to that outcome in another way. So regardless of what stimuli you use here, you can come up with some really good questions that collaborate with what your data teams want to know. In our case, we're often using a mix of different things. It might be app screens, we might have video of robot behavior, and sometimes it's just going through a script of questions and answers. We don't have anything developed, there's no stimuli at all. So regardless of where you are in the process or the kind of product that you have, there are ways to script out what you think the automation might do, even if it doesn't exist yet, to try to get feedback from users on how well that aligns with their expectations or with their ideal experience. Next is more traditional user experience design. And one thing that's really important here is that just like we continue to get feedback on usability, clarity, and other aspects of the design, we can continue to kind of sprinkle in social perception activities to see how different concepts and designs are resonating and to help us evaluate whether we're moving in the right direction. One thing I think we've all experienced is that when someone is new to design or to being a research participant, it can be kind of uncomfortable to break down a design and give a lot of feedback. And I find this to be especially true when we're talking about automation. We often find that participants have a hard time articulating their thoughts, or sometimes they'll do a lot of qualifying and say, oh, well, I'm not sure, this seems silly, before they actually say what they're thinking. So to help folks feel more comfortable, we really lean into the impulse to compare things. And that really helps us get good feedback. So we can ask participants to compare between different design ideas, current experiences, or just against their expectations, and then rate the various things that we've shown them by whatever categories we care about. Helpfulness, effectiveness, intelligence, specific character attributes. And that lets our participants feel empowered to give us feedback and to share their thoughts without feeling like they have to come up with words for something that they've never experienced before. Finally, ongoing feedback. When we think about iteration, especially as then you move through launch into version 2, hopefully, it's valuable to continually check back against a baseline to see if your users are having the social experience with your design that you were aiming for. So this requires you to have a baseline and a standard repeatable measurement framework. And that's pretty much the goal of standard measurement scales. So when you think personality test in the business or psychological sense, this is probably what you're envisioning, the kind of questionnaire where you answer a bunch of things and then it spits out whether you're an INTJ or Z. So this is a standard measurement scale, and we can use these. They're very common in human-robotic interaction research. And there are some really good ones, which I'll provide links to in my slides. But if you have a strong quantitative skill set on your team, it's also possible to design your own, and it might be worth it if you have the resources. So regardless of which questionnaire set you use, whether it's something that's already out in the world or something that you design yourself, it's really helpful to get some initial either pre-launch data or just after launch data for your baseline, and then you can continue to build your data set over time to consistently be comparing back to where you started to see if you're meeting your goals about the experience. As a bonus, if you're working on an already launched product that maybe doesn't have automation yet, but now you're talking about adding automation, you can build your baseline from the current experience. You can then compare it to after you add automation or as you're designing the automation. And you can use the same test for other brands in your space or for letting you compare different personalities that you're exploring. So this is a really flexible framework for comparing across different experiences, which can be really helpful. Ultimately, these methods are a general guide to get you started, but don't be afraid to get creative. When we're we're dealing with automation, it's new, and most participants are going to react emotionally, and then they're going to feel really weird about doing that. I think we all do when we really break down the fact that we are naming our cars and our sewing machines and our Roombas. But we get the best data when we keep studies focused on humanity. Human emotions, social experiences, and the frameworks we have for making sense of those socially amongst ourselves, that's really the same framework that we can apply to how we study automation and products moving forward. So I encourage you to get creative. The more you and your participants are engrossed in the activity, the less weird studying a robot vacuum or car or speaker or chatbot or HR system will seem. This is all part of the human experience, and we shouldn't be afraid to research it. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.